What is your prescription for advancing democracy in Iran? Bret, let's start with you.
First of all, full-throated support by the Obama administration for the people who are bravely demonstrating, risking their lives, having themselves or their children thrown into prison. Not what President Obama has done, which was to hem and haw for a week as the Nettas were murdered, and then say, well, gee, we really don't want to interfere in your internal affairs, but this kind of makes us uncomfortable. That is the beginning. You know, when you look at successful resistance movements, freedom movements, you look at what happened in South Africa, you look at what happened in Poland, you find that the moral support that was provided by the West turns out to be crucial to the people who most needed it. There's a wonderful, Natan Sharansky describes a wonderful moment where he's in the gulag somewhere, he gets wind that, can you believe this cowboy, Ronald Reagan, has called the Soviet Union the evil empire, and he's cheering because at least the President of the United States doesn't buy into the lie that the Soviet Union has been perpetrating for so long. The same with Nelson Mandela in South Africa. What if we had said, look, the apartheid government is the government that we have. Shamefully, a lot of people on the conservative side of the argument made that very point. We have interest. In fact, back then, the conservative case for South Africa is not so different from the case that Roger, now that I think about it, is making for Iran or people like Flint Leverett. This is a reality that isn't going to change. There are great dangers in regime change. We have to deal with the devil we know, so forth and so on. And there were a lot of people who said, no, the man on Robben Island is the man who counts. Well, the people in Evin prison are the people who count. And it behooves this administration, first of all, to give them names, give them faces, raise them at every opportunity that they can to apply the same kinds of pressures that the West applied following the Helsinki process in the 1970s. That is absolutely crucial. Now, to the Obama administration's credit, particularly Hillary Clinton, she has been taking initiatives to try to open up electronic access for, which has been suppressed by the regime, Twitter. I mean, even I'm too old to sort of figure out what all of these technologies are. But it's essentially the same thing that the West did, by the way, both on the left and the right, in Poland during the Solidarity years. The AFL-CIO provided printing presses for Solidarity so they could circulate Samizdat, the Roman Catholic. I mean, there was this remarkable alliance of everyone from Susan Sontag to John Paul II. The main point is we didn't forget what had happened in Gdansk in 1980. We didn't forsake the Solidarity movement for the political conveniences of rapprochement, détente, or accommodation with a Soviet Union that even in the 80s we saw as implacable and a regime that was never going to go away. I could go on, but actually this is an area where Roger and I are going to agree.
Roger, how can the U.S. government and other governments and civil society more effectively help the democracy movements in Iran?
Well, we've arrived at a pivotal moment in this debate because I agree with Bret. I was on the streets in Tehran for 12 days after the election. I was one of the last Western reporters to leave, and after a while people started saying to me, where is Obama? And I think the president was way too hesitant, not emphatic enough. He got to some much stronger statements, but he didn't get there in time. And my view remains to this day that Iran was on a razor's edge for about 6 days, a week. The authorities were at a loss. They hadn't foreseen this. And I will never forget, on June 15, being out on the streets with 2 to 3 million Iranians who had risen up to reclaim their votes. Every single person, myself included, who went down to the avenue between Enkelab and Azadi, between revolution and freedom, on that broad avenue that stretches for about 5 or 6 miles. Everybody went down there with fear in their hearts. And everybody who came out onto that avenue thought to themselves, my God, this is actually happening. And you climbed up wherever you could to try and get a view of the crowd. There was no end to it, no beginning to it. And I ask myself to this day, if Mousavi had stood there instead, here I stand, here I fall. We are now turning on the presidential palace. Because one thing in a crowd that size is that fear simply evaporates. What would have happened? Well, we've been doing a lot of thinking about the hypothetical here today. And the hypothetical doesn't have much use in history because it's what hasn't happened or didn't happen. And that is what I've just described is what didn't happen. But I do believe that the president should be firm in his denunciations of human rights abuses, the attempts to offer filters, technology filters to the Iranian people that enable them to circumvent the clampdown in the digital field. All that is good. I think Bret's, and here we begin to disagree a bit again, his characterization of the Cold War is not exactly accurate. Détente was an important component. If you actually look, as Timothy Garton Ash, for example, has closely at the events of 1989, from the beginning to the fall of the wall, President Bush Sr. effectively, out of prudence, said, you know, we have to wait for this to unfold, not do anything too rash. And in some ways, Iran is like Poland in the 80s today. And as in all areas, and I won't say it's a difference that comes about through age, because maybe we've tired of that metaphor, but you know, sometimes it requires the calibration of two policies. In this case, trying to get some kind of talking going with the regime, support for the Green Movement, rather than just saying, to heck with all that, we're going in, all guns blazing, in support of the democracy movement, and damn the rest. I don't think that's the way to go.